joining us in this discussion. And with that, viewers, we're now going to move on. Now, the Gaza peace talks have entered a crucial phase, with U.S. diplomats and officials from Qatar, Egypt and Turkey meeting in Miami to discuss the next steps. The main focus is on moving forward with the second phase of the ceasefire agreement, which includes deploying an international peacekeeping force, setting up an interim government in Gaza, and starting reconstruction efforts. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is confident that several countries will contribute troops to the peacekeeping force. Rubio believes these forces will help enforce the ceasefire and ensure security during Gaza's rebuilding process, which is seen as key to stabilizing the region. Let's listen in to what the U.S. Secretary of State has said.
To Pakistan for their offer to be a part of it, or at least their offer to consider being a part of it. I think we owe them a few more answers before we can ask anybody to firmly commit. But I feel very confident that we have a number of nation states acceptable to all sides in this who are willing to step forward and be a part of that stabilization force. And certainly, Pakistan is key if they agree to do so.
However, Rubio stressed that lasting peace cannot be achieved unless Hamas disarms and no longer poses a threat to Israel. He warned that without disarmament, any reconstruction could be undone by future conflict, making it essential for Hamas to neutralize its military capabilities.
That Hamas might hand over its heavy weapons but retain its smaller arms. Is the U.S. prepared to accept partial disarmament as sufficient?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the details of those types of negotiations. Let me just couch it to you this way. Everyone wants peace. No one wants a return to a war. If Hamas is ever in a position in the future that they can threaten or attack Israel, you're not going to have peace. Okay? You're not going to convince anyone to invest money in Gaza if they believe another war is going to happen in 2 to 3 years. So I would just ask everyone to focus on what are the kind of weaponries and capabilities that Hamas would need in order to threaten or attack Israel as a baseline for what disarmament needs to look like. Because you're not going to have peace. If 2 years from now Hamas is launching rockets or killing Israelis or carrying out, God forbid, another 7th of October type terrorist attack and so forth, you're not going to have peace. So who's going to invest in a peace? Who's going to invest in rebuilding a place that's going to get destroyed again in a future war? So that's why disarmament is so critical.
Meanwhile, Hamas has called for Israel's violations of the ceasefire to be addressed during the Miami talks. They demand an end to Israel's airstrikes and military actions, insisting that progress cannot be made unless Israel fully respects the terms of the ceasefire. Meanwhile, the on-ground reports show that at least 5 Palestinians were killed and several others were injured in another Israeli artillery strike on a school shelter in Gaza's city of Tufa neighborhood, where a wedding celebration was taking place. The attack, which delayed rescue operations, has been condemned as a serious violation of international law, with most of the casualties believed to be children. And I now request Professor Gunaratna to join us back into the discussion here.
What we have seen, Kriti, is that the Hamas threat continues because they do not want to disarm. So there will be a lot of pressure on the part of the mediators, on the part of Israel, on the part of the US, and other countries will put a lot of pressure on Hamas to disarm. Otherwise, there will be no phase 2. So phase 2 is what you call demobilization and the disarmament of Hamas. It is actually not only Hamas. It is Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the Palestinian Mujahideen Brigade, and 7 other groups. So it's the biggest challenge right now the peace plan, the peace process is facing.
Of course, Hamas is not going to disarm, which is the biggest problem with the Gaza peace plan as it has been proposed, because Hamas continue to maintain that disarmament will only happen if Palestine is recognized and if Israel withdraws. Then what's the solution, and what can these Miami talks even achieve?
There are 2 things happening. One is that Israel is very prepared now to strike and dismantle not only Hamas, but other threat groups, their infrastructure. It will weaken them. But what is more important what is more important is that Hamas is persuaded to disarm. If, of course, they do not disarm, Israel will resume the strikes. In parallel, there should be two efforts. One is creating new governance structures in Gaza. Second is, of course, the international community should ensure that there is a two-state solution. But this will come only when peace is restored and there's no threat to the state of Israel. Otherwise, Israel will not agree to a two-state solution.
Well, sure. And let's talk about the question of the international peace force, which is part of the next phase of the negotiations. Firstly, there are also concerns that the first phase of the ceasefire has not been met itself. You know, the conditions, the one hostage body is not returned as yet. You know, one challenge was that, so we don't know how they decided to move to the next phase of the ceasefire when the first has not been able to establish its goal. But coming to the question of the international peacekeeping force, do you think, as Marco Rubio is saying, that the countries are volunteering to send their troops? That's really going to be the case, because I'm sure there's going to be resistance from a lot of these nations to send their citizens, you know, and soldiers to fight this war in Gaza.
There are 40 nations that have committed and that are acceptable to Israel. There are some nations that Israel do not want their participation. So I think that there is a significant number of countries that are now willing to participate in the international stabilization force. So I believe that this plan will move forward. But what is important is, before the induction of foreign troops to Gaza, that Hamas is persuaded, if not compelled, to disarm. As you mentioned, phase one is the release of all hostages, living and deceased, and there's still one more hostage body to be returned.
Yeah.
Phase two will be demobilization and disarmament. Phase three is what is called the de-radicalization, because over a very long period of time, there has been these radical ideologies in Gaza, and still there is a significant support for Hamas, which is clearly a terrorist group because it staged a brutal massacre October 2023 that led to Israel's overwhelming response. Not only did they kill 1,200 people, but Hamas and its allies also took 251 hostages. In this day and age, no group should do that, and any group does that, that group should be disarmed, or that group should be eliminated.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us once again and weighing in your opinion in this discussion. Viewers will continue to track all the developments in connection to the peace talks. But now we move on to some news coming in from South Asia. India's capital, Delhi, has